Hello everyone, welcome to another series of Mind Map. Today's topic of discussion is development of Indian press. Under this topic, we will discuss about the brief introduction of the topic, then early regulations, struggles of early nationalists during the world wars, and role and impact of press. Let's have a look at a brief introduction of the topic. The press was first introduced in India by the Portuguese in 1550 and later it was popularized by the British. James Hickey is considered as the father of Indian press as he started the first Indian newspaper, the Bengal Gazette, in 1780. Gradually, press became an effective tool for the Indian nationalists to propagate the nationalist ideas and criticizing the government policies. To restrict these critical opinions and feeling, government came up with various stringent laws. Now moving on to early regulations. First, Censorship of Press Act 1799. This act was enacted by Lord Wellesley on all newspapers. It imposed almost wartime press restrictions including pre-censorship. As per the regulations, it was mandatory for newspapers to print name of the printer, editor and proprietor. All the material was to be submitted by the publisher to the secretary to the government. The breach of these rules was punishable. These restrictions were relaxed in 1818 under Lord Hastings. Next is Licensing Regulations 1823. These regulations were imposed by the acting Governor General John Adams. Starting or using a press without a license was a penal offence. These restrictions were mainly imposed against Indian language newspapers or those edited by Indians. Press Act of 1835 or Metcalfe Act. Charles Metcalfe is known as the liberator of the Indian press as his liberal policy resulted in rapid growth of the Indian press. As per this act, the printer or publisher had to give a precise account of the premises of a publication and cease functioning if required by a similar declaration. This act also repealed the 1823 licensing regulations. Next is Licensing Act 1857. This act was enacted after the revolt of 1857 by Governor General Canning and it imposed stricter restrictions on the press. The government reserved the rights to stop publication and circulation of any book, newspaper or printed material. Restriction Act 1867. This act replaced Metcalfe's Act of 1835 and was a regulatory act. As per the act, every book or newspaper was required to print the name of the printer, publisher and the place of the publication. A copy was to be submitted to the local government within 1 month of the publication of a book. Vernacular Press Act 1878. This act is seen as the culmination of racial tensions between the Indians and the British. The act was designed to better control the vernacular press and to curb the seditious writing. According to the act, the district magistrate was empowered to call upon the printer and publisher of any vernacular newspaper to enter into a bond with the government. The bond ensured that the newspaper does not cause disaffection against the government. The printer and publisher could also be required to deposit security which could be forfeited if the regulation were violated. The decision of the district magistrate would be final in above cases and can't be appealed against in court. Every press was needed to give in writing that it won't publish anti-government articles or columns. The act came to be nicknamed the Gagging Act. The provisions of the act discriminated against English and vernacular press. This act was revoked in 1881 by Lord Ripon. Now let's discuss about struggles of early nationalists. Since the early 19th century, press has been an important medium to propagate ideas and opinions by the Indian nationalists. During this period, many newspapers and journals emerged such as The Hindu, 𝐃𝐫𝐢𝐬𝐡𝐭𝐢 Iyer, The Voice of India, Dadabhai Naoroji, Amrita Bazar Patrika, Sisir K. Ghosh and Motilal Ghosh, Indian Mirror, N.N. Sen, Kesari Bal Gangadhar Tilak and Sudharak Gopal Ganesh Agarkar. These newspapers were not established as profit-making business but were aimed at spreading awareness about the policies of the government and also to foster nationalist sentiments. Since these newspapers had a wide reach, they stimulated a library movement. To restrict the flow of these anti-government sentiments by the nationalist journalists, stringent acts were enacted such as Section 124A of the Indian Penal Code. Anyone trying to cause disaffection against the British government in India would have to face imprisonment. Newspapers' Incitement to Offence Act 1908 empowered the magistrates to confiscate press property which published objectionable material. Indian Press Act 1910, the local government was empowered to demand a security at registration from the printer, and the printer was required to submit 2 copies of each issue to the local government. Now, during the World Wars, during the First World War, Defense of India rules were imposed to suppress the political agitation and free public criticism. On the recommendation of the Press Committee, the Press Act of 1908 and 1910 were repealed. The Indian Press Emergency Powers Act 1931 was introduced, which gave wide powers to provincial government. And Second World War, the pre-censorship was again imposed. The Press Emergency Act increased the imprisonment penalty from 3 years to 5 years. Now lastly, let's discuss about the role and impacts of press. First, spread of nationalist feelings. Press during Indian freedom movement helped in spreading the feeling of nationalism among the masses. The newspapers like the Bengali, Indian Mirror and the Hindu helped in creating awareness about government policies, rights, about the economic and social conditions, etc. Press became the voice of the leaders and a medium of sharing information. Represented people's views. Before establishment of Congress, Indian press represented people's views. They highlighted the popular demands and acted as a bridge between the government and the masses. And awareness about world affairs. Another important role that Indian press played was that it spread awareness about the world affairs. Events like French Revolution, Russian Revolution, American Civil War and later the World Wars popularized many concepts, due to which ideas like democracy, self-government, equality, liberty, rights became popular within the Indian society. Now it's time for the practice questions. First of all, prelims question. Who amongst the following is known as the liberator of the Indian press? John Adams, Lord Wellesley, Charles Metcalfe or Lord Hastings? And now mains question. Explain how the emergence of press in the 19th century contributed to the growth of nationalism and struggle for independence in India. Also state the steps taken by the British government to suppress its popularity. So that's all for today. Stay tuned for the next episode. Thanks for watching.